Okay, last week, Robin, I don't even know if you can remember this, but when we were talking about chapter 12, we were talking about the Jews fleeing to the wilderness, you asked me, is that Christians? And my answer to you was no, because I'm thinking church. I'm using church in the same reference as Christians, and that's what I'm thinking, but I'm not sure that that's what you were asking.
No, it wasn't.
So I did answer your question wrong, and so this is confession, and, but.
Come sit down with me.
Okay. So, oh man, you're stuck in the front row. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Hello.
I was gonna go back to the back.
No. This was reserved just for you. Okay, so anyway, I realized when I was studying that you did not say what I heard, anyway,
Well, I said
so
Christians, thinking those who have
converted
converted.
believers, you were exactly right. So
But, yeah, I
I'm
wasn't
correcting
clear.
myself. Yeah, no, I just heard church. That's not what you said,
Okay.
but it came to mind.
So you do think that that's what that was referring to?
I think that they are taking to heart what Jesus said, and maybe with the 144,000, maybe with the 2 witnesses, that's been part of their communication.
And that's
And
who
they
they were going
recognized
after.
exactly, and that they were Jewish people that took to heart what Jesus said. And I think there's a strong possibility that they were believers. Why else would they listen to Jesus and take it to heart?
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, but we do know they were Jewish, and I do think maybe verse 17, it does say that they're going after the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. So some believers did not flee, and those are the ones that.
But the rest of the offspring, and what I was thinking was that because non-Jewish believers are branched into the family, and that's why I was thinking that's who they were going after, because they couldn't go after the Jews.
And that very well, I mean, that could be true, and they definitely didn't flee and go, so
Right.
that's who he's going after. And so most likely you are right with that, okay? But regardless, I stand corrected. It wasn't, you never even used the word church, but that's what went through and was clicking in my head. So, okay, so we're gonna finish our review. We've been reviewing since we started back 3 weeks ago. We're gonna finish that review. Hopefully jump into chapter 13 and just kind of do a big overview of but we'll spend some time in chapter 13 because there's a lot of information in that chapter, and it also parallels Daniel really closely. So we're gonna make that comparison, okay? So we looked at the six of the 7 trumpets. We looked at the seals. We looked at 6 of the 7 trumpets. I'm gonna have to split you up already.
You told me to sit here.
I know, but I expected you to behave.
We'll try to do better.
Okay, will you try?
Some people you just can't sit next to.
No, you can't. How do you do it, Misty? Okay, last
sit
week.
next to myself.
Yeah, exactly. Last week we covered 6 of the 7 trumpet judgments, and those were covered in chapters 8 and 9. And then we looked at the chapter 10 and started looking at chapter 11, which is a pause between those trumpet judgments, explaining things that details that we didn't get when those were unfolding. Okay, so and we did mention Revelation 9:1. Let's look at that verse and what event is taking place. And we talked about this event too last week. What do we see in Revelation 9:1? And this is when the 5th trumpet sounds.
The 5th angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss.
Okay, and so we looked into that detail of who that star is, and who's that star? Satan. And so, it's written like had fallen, so it's taken place before this event. And so we did look at Revelation chapter 12, which records 2 falls, a historic fall and a future fall. Okay, so we did that, and then we also finished. We looked in Revelation chapter 11, And we looked at, there's two major events in Revelation chapter 11. We looked at the first one, which is the first two verses of Revelation chapter 11. And what was that first event? And that's where we stopped last week. What was that first event?
Measuring the temple.
Yeah, measuring the temple. So we know what? What do we know from John measuring the temple?
It's been built.
It's been built. And we looked at the timing of it, and we looked at that when he measured it, he excluded what?
The outer court.
The outer court. And because that's going to be trampled by the Gentiles. But he didn't, in the inner court, oh man.
Rats. Should have hit him. I'm sorry.
I know, look at that boy. Thank you. I knew he wasn't going to bring it. Okay, so we looked at the inner court, and that's what he partitioned out, and so we know that, and he described the worshipers. So what do we know about that? What's happening in that inner court?
They're doing the
Sacrifice.
Yes, they
They're
are.
doing the sacrifice.
And some of them take place outside the inner court. But a lot of on that altar, the brazen altar, I believe that it's called, but they also bring things into the holy place, incense and that kind of stuff on a daily basis. So, but we know that they're practicing what God established for them as Jews. So they're practicing their religion at that point in time, okay? And when we talked about it last week, it makes sense. Not everybody agrees on timing, and we're going to see that tonight. But we talked about last week, it makes sense that what part of the 7 years would that be? They're actually worshiping in the temple.
First.
The first part, because the Antichrist is going to come in saying, I'm God, and stop all of that. Okay, so it makes sense that it's the first. Not everybody believes that. Okay, so we're going to look at. I don't want to read every verse here in chapter 11, but we're looking at the two witnesses. This is the other major event that chapter 11 describes. So it describes the temple, and then it describes two witnesses. And let's read like 3 through 6.
And I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone would desire to harm them in this manner, he must be killed.
Okay, so what are they doing for, and how long are they doing it? How long are they doing it?
3.5 years.
3.5 years, and what are they doing?
Prophesying.
Okay, and so, and what kind of ministry, where are they? Where are they?
On you.
They are on the earth.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, most likely they're functioning in Jerusalem, and these two witnesses are most likely Jewish people. We went into details about who we think they are, and they could be nobody that we know. So there's again disagreement about who they are, and it could be nobody. But we talked about the potential; it could be 2 of 3 people. And we went into the details about why we think that. Remember 2 of 3 people?
Moses and Elijah.
Moses and Elijah and/or Enoch. Those 3 people is mostly where people land. Anyway, okay. So, and what ability do they have when they're on the earth?
Power.
Fire come from their mouth.
Yes. And what can they do?
Kill their enemies.
Yep.
They have the power to shut up the sky.
Yep.
To stop the rain from falling.
Which is one parallel to who? Yeah, Elijah in the Old Testament, he did do that in the Old Testament. So it lends itself for people to think, sounds like. Okay, all right. And what else?
Power power over the waters to turn them to blood,
Okay,
Please.
and to smite the earth with every plague as often as they desire.
okay, so they are going to be very powerful, and how do people in general accept their ministry?
Not well.
Not well, because what do we find out? We do know that they are killed, and we're going to look at that in just a second. We do know that they are killed after that 1260 days is gone, okay? And how do people respond to them being killed?
Celebrate.
Yeah. This is the only time in the whole book that we're told there's a celebration on the earth, actually. And so they're celebrating, and so that's what happens there. And then, let's see, what else? Okay, and their ministry is protected until, look, what's verse 7? What happens when their ministry is over in verse 7?
The beast ascends out of the pit and will make war against them and overcome them and kill them.
Okay, so that there's actual, the beast is not, the beast is not, kills them, okay? And that same beast, this is the first time we're introduced to him as the beast. And that name is used like 30 plus times in the book of Revelation, but this is the first time we're seeing him, and he actually has the ability to kill them at that 1260 mark. They finish their ministry, he kills them, and then what happens to them after he kills them? What do they do in verse 8 and 9? We don't have to read it, you can just say
They
from...
leave their bodies in the street.
They leave their bodies in the street, which is, what's the message about that?
That
So it shows what's gonna happen to anybody else that
Disrespect.
falsifies.
Yeah, it's completely disrespectful. So, and then after so their bodies are in the street, and how long are they in the street?
3.5 days.
Yep. And that's when everybody's celebrating, and of course, we can see these kinds of events on replay now. And so that's exactly, everybody in the world is going to know who they are, they're gonna see, they're gonna be exposed to their ministry and their communication because of the communication that's available 24/7. And then, so for 3.5 days, and then what happens to them?
And they get brought back up.
Oh, they're brought back to life, risen.
And where do they go?
Heaven.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds us not like of the rapture where it seems like that's pretty quick, but this seems like kind of like Jesus when
their
he,
ascension.
yeah, exactly. It kind of looks like his ascension. Okay, very similar. Okay, so that's really the essence of chapter 11. Now, when you're going to get two interpretations, okay, about these witnesses, in which half of the 7 years do they witness, okay? So you read, some are going to say the first half, and some are going to say the second half. For those who say the first half, there's basically 2 points, and there may be more, but these are the 2 basic points. So if they believe, I didn't even bring the bottle over here, Jared, because I didn't think you were going to bring this.
I can take it back.
No, I want it. O ye of little faith. Right? Okay, so look at, given the circumstances that they're in, and the fact that are given supernatural ability to protect themselves, some people think that that's an indication of what? Timing wise, that's my question. That's what we're talking about. Yep, that's one of the points that they're gonna say is in the second half is because they have to supernaturally protect themselves. And they consider the first half what?
Peaceful.
Easy.
He's relatively peaceful, okay? But then look at verse 14. Let's read. These are 2, and to be honest with you, this chapter is probably the most controversial chapter in the whole book because of timing, and people interpret timing different, which affects where you think these judgments fall, okay? So let's read for sure 14 and 15.
The second woe is past, behold, the third woe is coming quickly. And the seventh angel sounded, and there arose loud voices in heaven, saying, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever.
Okay, so in verse 14, what is John writing? What does he say?
The last woe is coming.
Yeah, okay, but and I meant 14. I said 15, but I meant 14. So what does he say about in 14?
The second one.
The second woe, what? Is past. Okay, so if the second woe has passed, where are we time-wise? What's the second woe?
Comes out to the first one.
Yes, it does. Sharon, you were exactly right. Huh?
You can't be in that second half, right? Because you've run out of time if you're in that 7-year period, right?
Well, we're gonna talk about that
Oh, okay.
right now, but because this says the second woe is past, where did we, okay, remember there were the first 4 trumpets, boom, 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 and then there's something flying in the heavens and it's saying,
You know, the eagle or
whoa,
whatever says,
yes,
whoa, whoa,
whoa, whoa, whoa, there's 3 woes that are coming, which is 7, and so then the 5th trumpet, or the 5th woe, is the first one, which is what?
The Satan falling.
Satan falling, that's exactly right. Yep, and the key to the abyss, that's the 5th woe, first woe or the 5th trumpet, okay? Then the 6th trumpet, which is the second woe, is what?
The beast coming out? No, that's
Witnesses.
those are those witnesses. The prophesying people.
No, remember it is
The abyss being open.
200 million army. That's the 6th woe, and 1/3 of the world is killed. That's the 6th woe. So when somebody reads this and it says the second woe has passed, and they look at this all in chronological order, where do they have to put that trumpet?
In the middle.
Right about the middle. So they're saying, so that automatically, timing-wise, puts all of those trumpets where? The first, huh? In the first half. So it puts the seals in the first half, and it puts the trumpet, and it is this verse, and the fact that those guys have to defend themselves, why they say that the trumpets have to be in the first 3.5 years. Okay, we're gonna get to that a little. I kind of preempted that a little bit. I meant to do that farther down, but I didn't. So this is another reason why they think that they're in the second, because some people think the second woe is there. Let me read it off my notes, okay? The events, basically the events from chapter 6 through chapter 19, they're saying are in chronological order. And what I've told you that some people interpret is that only those chapters that have the judgments are in chronological order. So that's the difference in how people view these events. And they read this and they go, okay, all of the things in chapter 10, all of the things we looked at in chapter 11, that was part, now the second woe is over. Okay? Does that make sense, how people look at it? And we're going to come back to this in just a minute. But it's because of those 2 reasons that they actually put these in the second half. Okay? It's a little confusing, and I'm probably not doing the best job of communicating that right now. I don't know why, but let's go farther on because we're going to be circling around these verses, okay? All right, so it has to do with them thinking chapters 10 and 11 are in chronological order, and therefore, because of that, then that's going to put these guys doing their thing in either the first half or the second half, okay? So let's look at if they think, and you know what, the majority of people think that they're in the second half. The majority of people, scholars, think that these guys, the two witnesses, are functioning in the second half. We're gonna look at that and things to think about, okay?
I mean, it kinda makes sense that they'd be in the second half having the powers. Just
And that's
because-
one of the reasons.
Just because of turmoil that the world's gonna be in,
Exactly,
and with everybody trying to kill anybody talking about God
yes,
or Jesus,
yes.
so.
So we're
And
gonna look
having-
at that in just a second, but that is what a lot of people think. And that's how they interpret it, and they interpret all the chapters basically in chronological order. There's not, events, the judgments are not the chronological order which is the way that I have presented it to you, is that the judgments are in chronological order, and then the chapters around between actually fill in details that have taken place, okay? So that is basically why they interpret it that they're in the second half.
Does
Okay,
anybody think that it overlaps?
that is a possibility, and why would, it is a possibility, but why would we think, gosh, that's kind of odd, why would we think that?
Well, because it's 3.5 years, so it's, I mean, if you break it up in like literally 3.5 years and 3.5 years, then they ministered and then they died in the second half, and then that's the end?
Mhm.
Or what if we just jump in the middle, like 1.5 years and then they pop up?
The end of
And
the
then they-
first half and the first of
and then
the
they
second.
start
It could be, but because there's no pattern like that anywhere, it's not, could it be true of them? It could be. But there's no pattern when we talk about time, it's always divided into 3.5 years. It always is, so, but it's possible, and that is another idea that people have. But the majority of people actually think that they function in the second half because of the trouble that they're experiencing. And also, they think that this is written in chronological order, and so it has to be part of the second woe. The details of chapter 10, the details of chapter 11 have to be part of the second woe. Okay? All right, so let's look at those who interpret in the first half. Okay? So think about, well, who's the beast that kills them? Yes, it is the Antichrist, and we will see that in chapter 13 because the beast is introduced there again, and some details about him were given. Okay, so what does he do in verse 7? What does the beast do?
Make war against them, overcome them, and kill them.
Yeah, he has the ability to kill them. This is at the 3.5 year mark, okay? So he has the beast has the ability to kill them. How about this way? Backwards?
Beast goes in front of that.
Yes, I know, Jerry.
I'm trying to help you out. We're
Thank
team.
you, I appreciate it, I obviously need it. Okay, so the beast kills the two witnesses. Now, let's think about,
Does he do that and then immediately walk into the,
Assumes power
and assumes power and says he's God? Because he was able to
that
kill
is
those, be able
definitely,
to kill those two
See,
supernatural.
yes, is definitely how some people view it, is because he was able to accomplish
When
what
nobody
no
else
one
could
else
do.
It's
could.
like one of his pseudo miracles.
And it sets him up, yeah.
So that has to be the first half.
And so then he goes from there into the temple and says, I'm God. At the midpoint, yeah, at the
Well, yes,
midpoint of the
The
tribulation.
end of the first half is when that happens.
Yes.
Because it's like you were saying, it's like,
So
the
let's
witnesses
look,
are gonna be there for however long, they're 3.5 years, and then the beast is gonna show up, and then it's gonna end the first 3.5 years.
Yeah, yeah, so now let's look at how long, okay? So if it is, we got the 7-year time period, say it's this way, and again, some people look at it the way, is it possible that it overlaps? But if we look at that first 3.5 years and say it's here, and we know then that's the midpoint of the tribulation, we know that the beast kills them, it adds to the rise of his power, which we do see in chapter 13, which we're gonna get to, but okay, and then what happens at 3.5 days later? What happens?
They rise.
Yeah, so they rise 3.5 days later after the midpoint of the tribulation, okay? So what if it's 3.5 days later?
Then you're not in the tribulation anymore.
What happens, what stops the tribulation?
Jesus.
Jesus returning.
The second coming.
Yeah, so we have the second coming, and the second coming 3.5 days later, these guys are rising from the dead. Because Jesus is the end, is what stops that 3.5 years. Okay? And then we also see, look at verses 19, or chapter 19.
They say since Jesus is coming, that would. So the witnesses wouldn't be part of anything if it's Jesus coming. They would just be there.
Well, they'd be still dead in the street, and
right,
people
they're
would
dead
be
in the street.
celebrating.
Yeah, but
But
three
then
and a half days later is when the breath of God is breathed into them and they are.
Right, but what ends this 1,260 days is the second coming of Jesus,
Right.
and they're in the street 3.5 days after Jesus returns.
Can't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where I keep coming back to. So let's look at chapter 19 and look at verse 11 and look at what event is taking place in chapter 19 in verse 11. It's a description
Christ
of,
on the white horse.
yeah, it's the description of Jesus returning at his second coming, okay? And when we get to chapter 19, we're going to go into that. But look at verse 20. What is one of the things that he immediately does in chapter 19, verse 20?
The beast is captured.
And
The
What?
beast is seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast
where are they?
and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, which burns with brimstone.
So where are they?
They are being worshipped in the temple as God.
Okay, yes, that does happen, but where are they when Jesus' second coming takes place?
On earth,
What does Jesus do with them?
throws them in the pit.
So that is, his second coming takes place 3.5 days later. The beast is gonna kill them when Jesus is throwing them in the pit, the lake of fire. Okay? So those are the kinds of things I struggle with if you put them in the last half of the 3.5 years. We aren't going to read those because we do read these verses a lot. Matthew 24:15 is where Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 is where Paul says, when you see him go into the temple basically and take his seat and say, I'm God. That's what he's referencing. And Daniel 9:27 is the Antichrist breaks that 7-year treaty halfway through. So they're all describing the same time frame. And if they are just starting their ministry at that point, and they have the ability to do what they do, and the Antichrist is where at this point?
In the temple.
He's in the temple. Why would they let him
Do that, yeah.
do that? If they really are
that
starting their
power.
ministry here and they have the ability to do what they have.
Because if
So,
they start
those are the struggles that people have that say there's no way that they can have it fits better here and it fits better here with that the beast killing them actually adds to his popularity.
You wouldn't have them on in their ministry for 2.5 years, if the beast is there, the beast is gonna kill them.
Yeah, and if,
To take up residence in the temple.
yeah, and
be
we're
worship.
gonna see here in chapter 13 that the false prophet has the ability to cause fire to come from heaven. They also, I mean, it just seems like they don't fit together with all of these things timing wise. Okay, and then at Revelation 16:16, and we will study that obviously when we get there, what event is taking place in 16, and this is when the bowl judgments start happening. But look at verse 16 and what event is taking place.
Armageddon.
Yeah, and where would the Antichrist be?
Would be
And again, we haven't studied it.
in the, it'd be five.
If there's the battle of Armageddon, where would the Antichrist be?
You'd be in heaven. That's where the battle is.
Well, no, it's on
No, it's on
earth.
earth.
That's a
Okay.
different, this is a future, it's during the bowl judgments. The battle of Armageddon is basically all of the people on earth getting ready to fight God, to fight Jesus when he returns. But where would the Antichrist be then?
Leading the,
Leading the charge of.
He's gonna be
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
battle, so how can he be in that battle
He's already doing
if
He's
at this
dead,
point he's in that battle, but he's killing these people in Jerusalem? So all of those things, and again, I'm gonna be, well, we'll talk about the trumpets in just a second, but I would say maybe they're equally divided on which, and it does not, and that basically what they go by is that they go by the ability, their enablement, which they're gonna need in the second half because it's gonna be horrible. And then also that they don't think that all those chapters are in chronological order. And so if they're in chronological order, then that makes sense that they're in the second half. Okay? And those that think that they were ministering in the first half think that because of the things we just talked about. Okay? So let's look at, now I preempted this part. Let's talk about the trumpets, okay? Are the trumpets judgments in the first half or the second half? And again, the majority of people lean toward one or the other, but there's good scholarship on both sides. And we probably can't just say emphatically it's this, but we may have a leaning, just like other people have a leaning with scholarship, okay? So look at let's read 14 and 15 again. And what did they say about the woes?
The second woe is past and the third woe is coming quickly.
Yes. So, because it says the second woe is past, they say that timing-wise comes all the way up to this point in chapter 11, and everything that's happened from chapter 9, the second half of chapter 9, about the trumpets is now included in what we looked at with chapter 10 and chapter 11. And so they don't think that they think this is all in chronological order, okay? And it's based on this verse, okay? That people that have, so they're gonna put the seals here, they're gonna put the trumpets here, except for 7. And then here's the bowls. And so that means there's how many judgments in the first half? Yeah, there's really 6 because this 7 and 1 are the same. Because when that blows, it shows those trumpets. So it's 6 plus 6 is 12. So there's 12 judgments here, and there's 7 judgments there. There's a total of 19. So, and they do it based on, and so in chronological order, then chapter 12 starts, and so they think that chapter 12, 13, and 14 basically are the midpoint. And then 15 and 16 start to describe the 7 bowls. So they look at those as being chronological. Does that make sense? that is one way that you'll find it interpreted, okay? Now, the people that struggle with this interpretation are gonna point out how many people die if 6 seals and the 6th trumpet, how many people die? 50% of the population now is dying in the first half. Okay? And what does Jesus say in Matthew 24:21? What does Jesus say?
See, is that when you see the?
That's 15.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, and then in 16 he tells everybody get out of Dodge. And then in 21 he tells them why they need to get out of Dodge.
For there will be great distress unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again.
Yes, so what does Jesus say happens in the middle of the tribulation, based on that? And looking at Paul, and looking at Daniel, but what does Jesus say?
A great tribulation.
Yes, after you see the abomination of desolation in the holy place, then there's a great tribulation. So, if Jesus describes these 3.5 years as a great tribulation, then why would 50% of the population die in the first half? That's really the crux of how people view that. The other way that you can view this is when like we said before, that those what chapters, the chronological order is what chapters?
8 and 9.
Okay, chapter 6, 8 and 9, and 15 and 16. Some people will just say 16 because the bowls are there. So we've got all these other chapters with more information, and each one of those chapters, the scenes change. They change to earth, they change to heaven, so the scenes change between these chapters. And so this is what advances time, is these chapters, and then all the other chapters have details that we don't have yet. And so, if you look at how would these people that believe this, how would they look at verse 14 and 15 of chapter 11? And it would include the fact that, hey, Jesus said the Great Tribulation is this time frame. And how can 50% of the people die in the first half if Jesus said that that's the worst part? Okay? So, I lost my place. Let's look at 14 and 15 of chapter 11. How could somebody interpret that to come up with, it's not all in chronological order?
Is death the worst thing that could happen? Maybe there's a lot worse than death. I know in World War II they always talked about death was much better than
Then
most
some
deaths.
survival. That's a good point.
Well, you know, it says that people are begging to die, can't.
And then can't, yeah.
In chapter 9, yeah.
Yeah, be tortured.
Yeah. But that would also be, according to that, that's the 5th trumpet.
It's true.
So that means that's happening here. And we are also having a demonic blitz, including the abyss and the demons functioning on the earth. That activity is happening, torment, indwelling people, all of that stuff is happening then in this first half.
It's not like spiritual demons. The demons, you can actually see them. They're here on earth.
Well, they are in the form of a locust.
Right, but they're demons and they're on,
Yeah.
there you can see them. It's not like a spiritual demon.
Well, I don't know that that's true. I think that they're inhabiting. He's
Insects?
using something that people could recognize, which is a swarm of locusts, to describe the impact of demons being released from the pit. But it does say that he torments people, or they torment people. So it is a spiritual torment for sure.
Yeah, but it also says the pit is opened and they come to earth. They come up So
Right.
it's not like they're spirits, you can actually see them come up.
Well, in the form, they inhabit something, and in that form, they're inhabiting what he describes as locusts.
Okay.
But he also is saying that they're tormenting people. on
Sure.
earth.
But
Sure, because it's, you're saying, what you mean is it's not describing demons, a swarm of
Right.
demons, it's describing a swarm of locusts.
It's
So
gonna
you're
be something
contrast-
that you would recognize
metaphor.
as something being
Yeah.
normal.
I mean,
Like-
you see the beast,
Demons are disembodied spirits though, so that would make sense that he was using a metaphor to describe their activities, basically, that's almost what it seems like, no?
And they do torment people, they do
They're
indwell
spiritual
them, they are
beings.
not able to, they're so tormented, as you just said a minute ago, that they can't die. They're not allowed to die. And that's how severe and harsh that spiritual.
We're
You know-
not, we haven't seen yet in what we've looked at, what the Great Tribulation is gonna be like.
No,
We
we
only
have not.
know that it's gonna be worse than anything we've ever seen.
Right.
And there's a part of it, part of something that John could not write down.
You're right, from chapter 10.
So, in my mind, why couldn't 50% of the people be killed in the first half, and the other 50% are gonna be killed in the second half, and it's gonna be way worse than we could even ever imagine, and we don't even know the details because they weren't written down. I mean,
Well, and
That's
there
where
are
my
the
brain
7
goes.
thunders that we don't know what those details are. You're exactly right. So somewhere, and some people will actually say that, you gotta have time for the 7 thunders. Okay?
Well, what can be worse than the 50% than being thrown alive into the fiery pit, fiery
Well,
lake,
well,
which is what he said.
yeah, and that's actually,
so
say,
is that spiritual too, or is that an actual thing?
well, no, actually, that is the Antichrist and the false prophet are being thrown into.
Did he say in all the followers that had been deceived?
No,
Eventually, but
no, didn't say that there. But we'll study that as we go farther through.
So they're,
Okay.
they're arguing just the mere fact of 50%. That's
Part of
that
it.
couldn't be it. That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
part of it, but again, you've got the more severe judgment, and you're leaving 7 bowls here versus 12 judgments here. That's part of it, and also the severity of
I
it.
think, whatever, or what most have said, death might be sweet compared to
The torture.
what's gonna take place, yeah.
And
So-
it might be, it might be.
So
And
they're saying that most of that is happening in the first half?
yes, yes. Okay, and those that think that that's not true, and that they would put the seal judgments in the first half, and they would put the trumpets and the bowls in the second half, the way that they read verse 14 and 15 is different, okay? So go back to 14 and 15, how could you read that and say, and when he says, what does he say there? The second woe has passed. How could you read that would give the freedom to go, wait, the seals are in the first half, and the trumpets and bowls are in the second half, because it's more severe.
You could say, if you're thinking that the seals are what start the second half of it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, but let's
They're
look at,
separate, right?
Yeah,
You go through the seals and then you start the trumpets.
yes,
And
the
then it's-
7th seal starts the trumpets, okay? But if you look at verse 14, the way that they read it is, okay, we haven't time hasn't moved forward since the end of chapter 9. Now we've got some details and scene changes that we haven't heard before. We didn't know about the witnesses, we didn't know about the temple, we didn't know about John eating the little book, we didn't know about the 7 thunders, we didn't know about those details. So we were giving those details. And they're in different places. All of a sudden now he's in Jerusalem. And here he is looking at the angel, okay? Then chapter 11, we're given, here's how they would interpret that, is that now in chapter 4, verse 14, we're starting with real time again. So it's like a reminder. The second woe has passed. Now, let me catch you up. Here's where we are in real time. The second woe is gone. Here we are. We're getting ready to look at the third woe. And so that's the difference in the interpretation. You read it all in chronological order, or you read those judgments that they're in chronological order, and that the details around the chapters around those judgments are actually giving you details of events that take place that were not recorded before. And so time doesn't move forward from chapter 9, which is the trumpet, the sixth trumpet. Time doesn't move forward, and now here in verse 14 he's going, okay, time's moving forward now. And he's getting ready to introduce the seventh trumpet blowing, which is the third woe, which opens up the bowls.
Okay.
So those are the two ways that people will interpret the timeline, and that's why the trumpets get put in the first half, or the seals are in the first half alone, and the trumpets and bowls are in the second half. Is if you think that when he's talking in verse 14, that, okay, here we go, now we're back in real time, we're moving forward, we're talking about the trumpets, that's how that is possible, okay? But if you think it's all in chronological order, then you've got to look at it this way. Because he's saying, right there in the middle is, okay, here's the time frame, here's where we're moving. Does that make sense? Kind of?
The only thing that really makes sense to me
Yep.
is that the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls are in chronological order.
Yes. Me too.
I agree.
Me too, because there's so many changes of location. Now you're in Jerusalem. Now you're with that strong angel. And there's more of those, like from chapter 12, which, okay, now we did this last week. Now we see there's a war in heaven. And then we also see the enemy going after Jesus when the nation of Israel is going to give birth to Jesus. That's all in chapter 12. And then we have them running to the wilderness at the end of chapter 12. So none of that is all sequential time-wise. But then when we get to chapter 13, which is where we are, we're seeing the midpoint of the tribulation. If you look at it like this, then you're saying some of these events actually happened toward the end of it. Which is why in chapter 9, when a star fell from heaven, well, that's because that happened somewhere between the fourth and sixth seal here. Does that make sense, what I just said? No. Okay. So if these are not in chronological order, then we have to, and if it's like this, the first six seals are in the first half, then when Satan falls, and this is going to talk about the two beasts, and this is actually this chapter, which none of these we've gotten to. Maybe we need to just stop right here and pick this up after we go through chapter 14. But these events, regardless, when we did 12 last week, there's multiple events that take place over a period of time. There's no way that you can say
It's all
chronological just based on that one chapter.
Why is it so mixed up? I don't know.
It does. I don't have an answer for it because I'm so chronological in my own thinking that that's hard for me.
Can we just get John to finish it out?
Oh, we could
Let
have
us
him
know.
just move the chapters around,
Yeah.
or if it is this way, then it has to be that time is right there, and the trumpets and the seals are in the first half.
Just curious, random
Yeah.
thought, like, do you know what the consensus is on a chronological Bible, if you read through Revelation?
I did look at it,
Yeah.
and I didn't, because you gave me one.
A long time ago.
No, but I did look at it, and it doesn't give clues, but, and maybe now I need to go back and look at it again, and because.
And also too, who are they leaning on
Yeah.
for their,
Yeah. I can tell you
yeah,
there's a majority of people are right here because they look at this whole thing in chronological order, and because it says in verse 14, the second woe is past, then they gotta have all of this that way. If you don't look at it in chronological order, then it doesn't have to be that way. That's really what it comes down to. But chapter 12, like we just said, kind of throws a little bit of a wrench in that, because there's time jumping all over the place there, thousands of years.
Just giving it a replay of everything that happened.
Well, and he's also showing kind of the history of Satan in chapter 12. And his activity to thwart God's plans is really what's happening, and his future activity to thwart God's plan. So what I'm gonna do, we're gonna jump to 13, and we're gonna look at just an overview of chapter 13, but what I'm gonna do is come back to this again after we hit chapter probably 15, because some of this stuff may make a little bit more sense, but I think, to me, it's, and again, most people, there are a group of people that think all of the judgments, as we said, there's basically three ways people interpret. You got the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls, and they're all in this part, and they are not happening here. So those are the three ways that people who look at Revelation as a future book, those are the three ways that they look at them. And it is because of
So if you look at it that way, what's in the first 3.5 years? Just peace?
That's the
relative
peace.
peace.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now 50% die.
Well, they're saying that all happens here.
They're saying that.
Exactly, and that this is the time where that covenant is in existence, the temple's being built, you know, there's worshipers in the temple, so there's relative peace.
But, yeah, it's like, would 50 million, or half the world's population die during that period when there's,
I don't see how there could be.
yeah.
I don't see how.
Well, what that,
You're right,
but
now
if
that
you
you
look
look
at
at
it
that,
the
that's
third
what
way,
is
then
so
that
boring.
50% would move over to the second.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This actually makes more sense to me than this,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
I've
I
never
agree.
heard that.
You'd be
interpretation.
shocked at what people, and even Amir, if you look at Amir's book, he's gonna say this. It's just like one sentence, but what is true is they kind of avoid it. They come to a conclusion over and over again. They don't get into the weeds and say, this is how this is where we would interpret one of three ways. They don't
But we
really
need
get
the
into
weeds.
those weeds, and they just will say, they'll just say, okay, the seals are in the first half and the trumpets and the bowls are in the second half, without getting into why do some people look at it that way? Why do some people look at it this way? And it is because of these two verses, and they think that it's now we're followed time up to here in 10:14 or 11:14, and now the second woe is over. So everything that comes before that has to be part of this, because we're going to chapter 12 where Satan is thrown down. We're going to chapter 13 where we talk about the beast and what the beast is doing.
So, but if there's a second woe where people die, that indicates that people had died before that too.
True.
So,
But
but did they die before that first 3.5 years during the rapture and stuff like that?
it depends on if you look at it this way or this way.
Because there's a woe that had a woe come, and this is the bigger woe. So,
But, and I know where I lean, but I cannot emphatically say that this is wrong, but I struggle with this because of because of what this feels worse. And again, we've got some disruption in a chronological order here, so how do you say it's in a chronological order if there's disruption here? But we're gonna come back after we get through chapter 14 and somehow loop back through this and see if some of this, as we've looked at 13, we've looked at 14, makes more sense, okay? But again, as we get exposed, and I've had to expose myself to this a ton to finally go, what are they looking, what are the differences and why do they say, and most people don't say, well, they say it's in the first half, but they don't say why.
they don't have evidence for it.
Yeah, they don't say
scripture back
why.
up.
They say it's in the second half, but they don't say why.
You have to really dig.
You have to really dig to get down to, it's because of these verses right here, and how they read them. Those verses determines where those judgments go. And this to me would make more sense than this. But there's a lot of good scholarship that can blow me out of the water that will say this. So, and that's why people don't study Revelation, because it's confusing.
It's frustrating.
It is, parts of it are just confusing. But there are so many things that we can figure out, and so many things we can know, that it's worth, and God tells us we're blessed by doing this.
But the point of it is you don't wanna be around by that, you don't wanna be around
Exactly.
it.
You
So,
don't.
except Jesus Christ.
You don't, and
That's
we
the whole
should.
point
Stick
is,
with that.
Yes.
let's
Not
be gone
get too
before this
worried about
happens.
interpreting Revelation.
So
Yes.
you have to,
Cash
if you,
my ticket in?
they're giving you a glimpse of what salvation is under judgment. We're under grace right now. This is salvation, we're living in grace.
We are,
So it's better to get salvation in grace
yes,
than get salvation in judgment.
yes.
Cause that's what that is, it's judgment.
Yes,
God's
you're
judgment.
exactly right, and that's a good point, Dan. And amazingly, that there's God's grace to communicate the gospel through those 144,000
Yeah.
and through those two witnesses to people that are alive
Yeah.
during
There's
judgment.
still grace
giving
during
them a
judgment,
chance.
There
but,
is still
and there's
grace.
not judgment during grace. So,
Yes.
so we're not getting the judgment part of it. I mean,
Well, and Jesus
like
was
that
given the
judgment.
judgment, yes,
Yes.
exactly right.
It doesn't make sense to me for even the sixth seal to happen in the first.
Me either, that's where,
You can't erase all mountains and islands.
Yes.
Turn the entire
Your
planet
whole-
into Kansas.
exactly, I totally agree
And
with
not-
you.
And not say and say that that's relative peace or
Yeah,
whatever. So,
I think,
Yeah.
I think
like,
once you
that's
hit.
kinda like the end, right at the end.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, is that the sixth seal, to me, has to be over, because the entire landscape and the sky has changed. And that's dramatic. And you've got, so, yes, and then you've also got, if you think about the trumpets, you've got 1/3 of the earth is burned up, 1/3 of the sea, the fresh water, you see the thirds, and then you see now light is 1/3 gone.
Because you lose a third
All
of the,
right here.
you lose a
Which
third
means
of the people on earth during that part.
Yes,
And then the great tribulation comes in and you lose half of the remainder.
Yeah,
The only one of those that says that people die is wormwood.
No, I think there's two
At least in
of them.
my book. It burns up the grass, kills a bunch of like sea life.
yes,
That
And
kind of stuff
everything
as
will
far
be
as
feral.
those.
but yes, but it's
Yeah, I'm not
next.
saying it's peaceful.
No, I'm agreeing with you, I'm agreeing with you.
But it's the sixth trumpet where he says 1/3 of the people die.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, but
you're
like,
right, it's
Up
before,
until then, the only, so
it's
the
the
first,
earth, it
the
is,
first 5,
yes,
it's the earth.
It's after
And
the earth.
that's gonna create famine and all that kind of stuff.
exactly.
So, it's like the seals and the trumpets are, like, the seals are kind of a generalization of the trumpets.
Except for they're open, so
They're
that
their
makes
own
us wanna
thing.
do it in chronological order because he opens them. And so there are definitely worse effects from the
Well, yeah,
trumpets.
you have to release the Antichrist and all
Yes.
of that, and then relative peace, I guess, on 3/4 of the earth, because when death is given 1/4 of it.
Oh, okay, yes,
Yeah.
Because like when
In the fourth
maybe
seal.
I'm getting,
in the fourth seal.
Yeah.
maybe I'm getting
Death and
them
Hades was
confused.
following close behind, they were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague.
So a lot of people do believe that that's where we cross over the line.
So when the horsemen are released,
You're just
that's
having
during
relative,
the
yeah, you're
seals.
just having the relative peace on the other 3/4 of the
Yeah,
earth.
well,
'Cause
and
that's-
even the white horse,
Yeah,
he pretends to be in peace, which we know is the Antichrist, and we know he signs that treaty with Israel, and we.
But that needs to come at the beginning.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
So that's when, the famine and death, they killed during their reign over earth. So that's, you're betting, that's when people die at the first half.
Right, that's
So there's not,
relative
like,
peace,
it's not, there's no death during that part, there's lots of death.
yes,
But when you get to
exactly.
the Great Tribulation, you have
The
half-
entire
the entire
earth,
earth is affected.
exactly. And in chapter 6, as you just pointed out, not only your Google Earth map is completely different from that point forward. that's where it changes, and also the sky is completely different from that point forward.
And
Did
the
we have a
water.
question about
Yeah, and the
wormwood?
water.
No water.
Huh?
Didn't we have a question last week about wormwood?
We read that,
Yeah,
and that pollutes fresh water,
okay.
yeah. Okay, so,
But it's a fallen star, it's a meteor or something.
yes. Okay, so basically, these are the ways that people that look at Revelation as a future book, there's all kinds of stories if you look at it as history, but these are the three basic views of Revelation as a future book, and the reason that some people will say it's only 3.5 years is because Revelation really only talks about 3.5 years. There are a couple of times the rider on the white horse and measuring the temple that you could see those events taking place in the first half. But the majority of the events that Revelation refers to in the intensity of it that's why people say it's just the last 3.5 years. And Jesus himself said in Matthew 24:21, when you see the abomination of desolation, then there's a great tribulation. So they also look at that verse and saying, Jesus says the great tribulation starts here and goes here. It's hard. And I don't expect you to land in any particular place. And again, I think when we get to 14, we'll circle back again. But I can tell you, in the book that we're using as a guide some of the time when I remember, Amir's book, he holds to this. But he didn't say why. And there's only one sentence. But he didn't say why. And it is true that people will say this is the way it is, but they don't explain how they got to that conclusion. But to me, if I can at least keep these things in mind, at least it helps me that these events that we're reading about, and this, to me, this makes the most sense. That these are in chronological order, and that these other chapters around that are providing us with the additional details of things that took place. And so, so we'll stop there unless anybody else has. Yes, sir.
I got a question.
You do that.
Because you introduced Revelations 19:20, and my brain does not know how to put the brakes on,
Okay.
and I continued reading.
Okay.
After the beast and the deceiver and all that stuff gets thrown into the fiery pit, it goes on to talk about, as you enter into 20, about the dragon being captured by the angel and chained to the abyss for 1,000 years. How does 1,000 years fit into this 7-year period?
It does not.
It's after.
It's after. It's after the second coming. So the second coming takes place, and those 1,000 years are an event. And again, when we get to chapter 20, we'll look at that. Some people don't think it's a literal 1,000 years, but that is.
Because he says he's released to come back and
I don't
do these
understand.
things, and I thought once Jesus, the second coming, that was it. Everything's been made perfect.
Yes.
And the new world, the new heavens. And the
That
new
still
earth.
happens, and we will look at the timing for those things. It still happens. Yes, it is.
Doesn't that coincide with the millennial reign?
That is the 1,000
During,
years. Yes.
that's where they would be while we are.
And part of, there's a lot to go into there, Joe, but it is after, and it is before the new heaven and the new earth, and there's reasons for it. One reason that I can give you now, and we'll look at it, but one reason is there are things that God promised to the nation of Israel that have never happened. And there's got to be a time frame that he's going to fulfill those things that he promised them. And that's part of what that 1,000 years is for. They never, for example, they've never inhabited all the land that God gave to Abraham. Told him, these are your borders, this is your land, this is your country. They've never had all of that territory.
entire territory isn't just that little piece of
No,
Israel.
it is not.
It's from Egypt to
It is.
Iran and
It
Turkey
From
and,
river to sea.
yeah.
And they have never inhabited that, so it is not gonna be fulfilled like God said unless there's some time frame for that event to take place. So that's just one thing, one
And that
reason.
would need to be before the new heaven and
Mhm.
new earth, because,
Because
those
he
borders
promised
don't
that's
count
what
there.
was gonna happen.
so that
Until
would
they
need to be
occupy the,
during 1,000 years.
Yes, that's one of the reasons for the literal 1,000 years.
it's kind of, just a side question is like, if that is what's promised to them and they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, how could they miss that big of an area?
Well, they brought a lot of that on themselves
Right.
because they weren't obedient.
Right. But what I'm saying is, if they're promised from Egypt to all that, if that's the promised land, then where were they wandering?
They were being led by God. the
Yeah.
whole
I know, but
time.
that's what I'm saying, is they were wandering on earth.
Right.
There
Yeah,
has
but
to be a-
they're wandering in that basic area, not in Israel, but in that basic area. That's where they were wandering, and we will actually, if you see, once they occupy Israel
Right.
and they start to conquer Israel, there's a phrase in there used over and over again, but they did not finish,
Right.
basically.
Because when they would go in, they wouldn't kill off
Exactly.
all of them. And then
And-
they would leave some of it behind, and
yes.
then he
They,
told them
yeah,
not
they
to
leave
do
a
it, but
remnant
they
of
were
the original
disobedient.
population.
Yes, they did not follow the instructions, and like you said, it's disobedience to occupy,
Right.
to take over the territory. They stopped, and so every time they stopped, that eliminated them from occupying everything that God promised
Because they
them.
weren't supposed to like intermarry with
Right.
That was
with
part
the-
of it too. Yep.
and do away with all the people that were in that.
But that's a
population.
phrase in there when it's like they didn't do, I can't remember the phrase exactly, but it's basically they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Right.
They didn't conquer those countries that were occupying the nation.
And of course, they were dispersed for thousands
Yeah,
up until the 1940s, so
Yes.
that's an interesting.
yeah,
Dynamic
that's a
there,
good
too.
point.
And you've always said it, I don't know where it's at, but in terms of prophecy, they were promised to be brought back to their land, right? So that's what happened in 1940s, but also attached to that is that they cannot ever be removed from their land ever again,
Exactly.
right?
Yes,
So there's no way that all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East right now, that they're gonna be out of.
They've been
at
brought
least
back
where
to their
they're
land,
at
but
this
they
point.
haven't been,
That's
they
it.
haven't,
Yes.
they haven't taken possession
Yes.
of it.
Yeah.
Right.
They are in it, except for one little piece,
yes,
and that keeps getting, trying to whittled away by
other
these
government,
other
yes.
governments, and
Yeah.
so it's like that. I mean, for us to see Israel take possession of all that original promised land in our lifetime, that would be pretty amazing. And
It's
that would be the
it's an impossible event, really,
Real.
as
It
we look
would-
at the,
it's an impossible
Climate.
event for the Israel people to do that themselves.
right,
So
or for the United
when,
States to do that themselves. That has to be God-driven
Yes.
thing, and that would start this part.
Yes.
so when the abomination takes place and Israel runs to the hills and hides, and God takes care of them, and all this stuff happens, then after that, is it when the 1,000 years starts and they come and take their land?
the
That's
1,000 years
promised.
starts after the second coming,
Right,
that's when it starts, okay?
but
And-
all those Jews that ran and hid and were taken care of by God,
Yep,
were they, is it ever addressed what happens to them up to the second coming?
Are you talking about during the tribulation?
Yeah,
Would they run to the hills? Is that what
because
you're-
they're hiding
protected.
out and they're being
That's all
taken
that-
care of
that's-
by
that's all
God.
you hear.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said they're protected for the entire tribulation,
Right.
that's all that you hear.
Yeah, so,
So like the
so
one
if they're
1,400.
still alive
That would
at
mean
the
they
end
would
of the
become part of the
tribulation,
land.
when the second coming happens, then they
Matthew
would be
25.
able to,
Matthew, that's when Matthew 25 takes place, the dividing of the
Right.
sheep and the goats, because some people will be alive when Jesus returns, and some of those people will enter into the kingdom, and some of those people will not, because they're not believers.
Yeah.
even at this point, there will be non-believers and believers on the earth, and those Jews that have converted, well then, oh, that's what you see in chapter, that's the way to read Matthew
They
25.
have to confess that he is the Messiah before that all, I
Yes,
mean, and some of them won't.
yes.
Yep.
And that's also why he says, if you treat my people right, you know, you've done it to me. And it is in the context of the tribulation and the fact that there are Jews that will be taken care of, like in World War II, by people who step up and do that. But this event of the second coming is Matthew 25, when the sheep and goats are separated. Thank you. Does that answer your question?
I'm not sure he
I don't-
understood my question.
I don't want to go home and go, I told Robin wrong again, 2 weeks in a row.
That would be
So,
bad.
It would be terrible.
But yeah, there's
No, you
different,
answered it. You said that's when that sheep and goats thing
Okay.
happens.
Yeah.
Those people who are still living,
Okay, thank
they
you.
get judged. right?
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what happens at this point in time, that, you know, everything stopped, and then you do have the millennial kingdom, and the people that go into the millennial kingdom were believers that were living at this point in time.
Okay, so that answers my question,
Okay.
because those Jews that were being protected would still be alive.
Yes.
And
so
so
are you
that's when they would
saying
take over
like the
their
144,000,
entire
or are you
promised
talking
land.
about the
Yeah,
ones that-
well, yes, and the reason they're gonna take over everything is because Jesus is gonna be king. And so he's running the show, and he's going to be,
Well, the church will be coming back with Jesus the
Right.
second time. So will we be on the earth as well? Okay,
It's
that's what I
just so,
thought.
it's so bizarre that he still has not finished the final task of getting rid of Satan. Just like in the
it
beginning,
is.
before he even created mankind, it's the same process. He
It
still
is.
keeps him there. And he uses evil to accomplish good.
He
So
does.
it's a very, very, very loose just way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But it's the same pattern he's always played out. It's just then, after all of that, he's
Yes.
still there. He's
Yes.
in chains, and he'll get free.
And for
It's so
me
strange.
personally, and I'm sure a lot of us, that, and you're exactly right, Donnie, but the thing that I really look forward to the most about heaven is that's over.
Is what?
That the enemy can't bother us anymore.
Mhm.
He cannot bother us anymore. And that's the ending point of that. And when Satan is released, it has to do with the people that are here living on the earth during that 1,000 years.
Well, and the difference too, in terms of people in relationship to God, but as people function too, I guess during that 1,000-year period, people still maintain free will during that period.
Exactly.
Obviously,
They,
because there's gonna be people who turn away from Jesus during the millennium.
Exactly.
So, and it's almost like people having free will has to be paired somehow with the enemy still existing. And then heaven, he no longer, well, he exists in eternal punishment, but that's a permanent final decision. But it's
Yes.
almost like there has, like, in order for people to have free will, the devil has to, I don't know, I don't understand.
it does, and it also has to do with the fact that there are people living at this point in
Yeah.
time. And those people that enter the kingdom, they did not die at this point. They enter the kingdom, and then they also have children during that 1,000-year reign. And not all of those children, as you just said, are converted.
Yeah.
And it's choice.
And
and
Jesus is literally standing there.
And he's in charge.
But
That's amazing.
Adam and Eve, I mean, they had the
They had it
greatest
all.
experience.
Yeah, they
ever.
had it all.
Right?
Yeah.
And it just really
And
shows,
disobeyed.
and it shows kind of what is at the heart of us.
We're screwed up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And even in that situation, what was the temptation they fell for is you won't need God, and you'll be like,
You'll
Right.
be God.
you'll be God.
You'll be just as powerful.
And isn't that really at the heart of the
Same
temptations that we
temptations we
deal with?
have today.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, be sure and eat Boy Scout cookies before you go.
Boy Scout cookies.
Let's pray, and, okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we just wanna thank you for writing down everything that you wrote down in the Bible, whether it's in Revelation or where it's somewhere else. And as Barbara said on the way here, it's like reading the Bible is really good for our minds and really good for our hearts, because you help us to have things to think about. And those things that we think about impact our heart, and they impact our relationship with you, and they change us. And God, as we've talked about here at the end, is we need to change. We need your work in our hearts and our lives to change. And even if we know you, we still need to change. And I pray that we would cooperate with you and with your Spirit, but we would also have a temporary mindset when we live here, and that we would be looking for things in our life on a daily basis of how to encourage other believers, how to support other believers, how to help each other get home, and also just like challenge, just putting the gospel out there for people who don't know you. Thank you for your mercy and your kindness and your grace, and the impact of that on our lives. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.